Hey everybody, KroppiGamer here. Hopefully you're having a wonderful day, and of course we're at that point in the week where I had told you that we would do a Kroppi review. Of course, the last game we did was Lord of the Rings. That one ended up falling short, but let's see where today takes us into, well, more medieval times with dragons supposedly, but you'll find that lacking in this. So what we have here is Game of Thrones, essentially the board game. See, you're noticing a theme here where we cover card and slash board games that become video games. What a great concept, you know. No, we won't. Not every game's going to be like this. But this one is also done by Fantasy Flight Games. Of course, they did the board game, which essentially the board game is going to, in a way, give a vibe of playing a Risk or well, that's probably the best example. Would be it'd feel like playing Risk, and we'll kind of break down a little bit, but of what we've got going on here. One of the things that's already, we'll hop into the game now. Look at the interface. You know, isn't this amazing? I think this is such a huge turnaround from having a Windows 8 vibe. But you know, nothing crazy about. You know, you've got your tutorial, which some of us have, you know, didn't really ever dive into. We've got challenges that you can do that kind of set points and what you have to try and accomplish during the game. Of course, there's skirmish, so you can play against yourself, and of course, this is their expansion. We'll get into that in a little bit. And then, you know, of course, there's like leaderboards, achievement, and the lobby has does, you know, there's a little bit of activity. There's usually a couple of games, you know, for people wanting to kind of team it up and stuff. And generally, this is pretty much. This is pretty much Game of Thrones in a nutshell, right? Just kind of briefly kind of going over everything. So let me pull up, you know, let's in a way look at some of the pros. Now, I can see one of the things that might find appeal in this game, and I won't be as cheesy where I was last time, where I was like, well, it's Game of Thrones. We won't do that this time. One of the things is going to be accessibility. You know, you might have, you know, friends and family that, you know, obviously can't really come around for the board game. So, you know, this is another way to play online. And you have the different the AI, which doesn't really fit well on here, but that's probably the random. Oh, there we go. Now it's, I don't know what the heck it was doing earlier, but that's the random. You can tell some of the interface is still kind of wonky. It's like random is way off. It's literally off my screen. And we'll get into some of the more glitchier kind of side of stuff of this. But anyway, so you have, you know, 6 factions. You can set the AI to whatever you want to do, easy, hard, whatever. You can pick what house you want to play in particular, and make the other houses play. This Tides of Battle that you're noticing, this is basically if you want to add a randomness element to the game. You know, how random is it? Well, you know, again, I'll probably leave that for the con. And of course, here's a dance with dragons, but I'm just gonna be random. Let's go ahead and just start a game, and let's just go into it, and you can kind of see what more of this game looks like. Oh, look, there's House Stark, there's House Greyjoy, there's me as playing as House Lannister, House Martell. Okay, So, not to get like full on into the mechanics of the game, I'm mainly just showing like, hey, that's pretty cool. Got some ships here, got some footmen and stuff. You know, we got some horses. You know, that's pretty cool. You know, that's pretty neat. We got some horses. We got some ships. You know, again, the mechanics of the game are very interesting. This is very much copy and pasted from the board game. This isn't like with the Lord of the Rings card game, in which, you know, card abilities were kind of changed and so forth, and the mechanics of it were changed. This is pretty much gonna play like the board game. And you know, what you've got going on is you issue orders and then you attack and stuff, and it's really it's a game that this timer here that I'm pointing to is 10 turns. And that's how long a game will last, up until, I think, I can't remember how many castles you have to get. Is it 5? I think you have to get 5 castles. Whoever gets 5, that's the end of the game, basically. And that's basically it. And so, like, all these keeps are very important to when you're playing, and you issue orders. One of the other cool elements that I do like about this game is, and again, we're still kind of on the pros. I haven't really bashed the game yet. But if you click on yourself, you actually have cards that you play during combat, and they have like different abilities. And the number up here that I'm kind of pointing to with my mouse cursor, and not just literally with my finger, God, it is like how much strength will add to your combat units. And basically, the higher the combat, the more damage. But again, very cool concept. You know, all the houses have their own cards and stuff, which is pretty cool. And yeah, I think that might be it for the positive stuff. So I think on one hand, it's the accessibility of the game. I like. I think this is a very fun board game. And those are probably my positives. That's why I'm kind of like diving in. I didn't do so much on the Lord of the Rings one, and if I ever go back and redo it, I probably should show and be like, hey, look, here's Frodo. But you know, just before I really start hitting on the cons of this game. So one of the things, and we can back out now because I don't really need to keep this. We'll just forfeit. Yep, we lost. Damn, we suck against the AI. We're pretty bad at this. And you know what? Maybe we go to the lobby to do this, and we'll create a regular game. Okay, whatever. So one of the things is this Tides of Battle is supposed to give like a randomness to the game, but it doesn't really seem to do that. It typically looks like it's giving a randomness to helping the AI, and which is kind of sad. You know, you kind of want. I'm not saying it's like 100% tilted towards the AI, but it's supposed to, like, what it does is it'll like add an extra attack, or it'll add strength and stuff. So it can, in a way, it can kind of shaft somebody. Someone's getting shaft. And a lot of times, I shouldn't say a lot of times, but there's just times you feel like with the Tides of Battle, if you have that active, that you're the one getting shafted versus the AI, which is kind of frustrating. But anyways, it is what it is. But I kind of want to hit on the other con to this game, and this is probably a pretty big one, which is, and some people are still kind of making mention of some of the glitches. And I actually looked back at a older post, and it looks like they have seemed to address it. But I'm going to go ahead and bring it up, because originally they kind of acted like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. So when this game first came out, which was, I think, about like October of last year, so it's almost been out for a year. When this game first came out, there was a lot of like hype and stuff, like, oh my god, it's Game of Thrones. And when this game came out, you know, again, I mentioned the accessibility as a pro, but as a con is the internet connection. So for someone that originally was playing this when it first came out, you'd be like playing with whoever that you were playing with in multiplayer, and there would be a disconnect, and you'd be sitting there going, well, crap, and midway through your game. It's just really frustrating for, like, well, this would be kind of the whole reason as to why you'd want to get this, is because you don't have, you know, everybody lives too far away to set up the board game, right? This is an easier way to set up the board game. Well, if you can't hold a connection to finish the game, what's the fucking point? You know, I'm just being honest. Like, what's the point? And that was one of the challenges. I would say nowadays, if you're still playing it, again, there's a little bit of activity still. You saw in multiplayer, definitely more activity than the Lord of the Rings card game. When it came to this, you know, I would say now if you're playing it with others and you feel like, well, wait a minute, did we get disconnected? Chances are it's probably not that. It's probably more likely that your opponent is probably just taking a little bit longer with their time. It doesn't just fully on mean that that the game has basically just wigged out, and lost connection. But if you were originally playing this game when it first came out, you're pretty much like me, and you have that PTSD from it. And then one of the other things that I kind of, okay, this is a call it for what it is, okay? So they have like their nice little expansion box, right? You know, again, I have the mouse cursor over it. They have their expansion box. And this expansion is called A Dance with Dragons. Ooh, dragons! Now, I hinted at this earlier. I said medieval times with dragons, quote unquote. I kind of hinted at it. And in the actual, there is an expansion to the board game. And the expansion in the board game does add dragons. It actually adds, in a way, it adds House Targaryen. This expansion doesn't. Okay? And introducing a new set of house cards and alternate and a more setup, shorter setup. You know, it's basically a shorter game. What this is doing, essentially, what they did is, and we can go in and look at it, but I probably won't do it, and I probably should have just left it in single player. Let's play with A Dance for Dragons, and we can kind of tell. Instead of having 10 turns, now you only have 6. It's like, ooh, 6. Okay, you know, that's cool. We're House Martell, so we're way down over here. And so they're short. It's a shorter game. The pieces are kind of, we're basically further in the war, and so the dynamics of the setup positions have all changed. You know, basically everybody has just more crap on the board. But the other thing that's changed, and I will say this is kind of the cool element, is like the card abilities for each of the houses are different too. So they changed that. And that was about it. Okay? But I'm going to have to be honest. It's called, the expansion's literally called Talking About Dragons, and there are none. So, to me, you call it for what it is, that this is this is quick play. It's just literally what it is. In all honesty, I didn't really think 10 turns was really taking up that much time, but it is what it is. Like, I'm sitting here going, well, you could finish Axis and Allies. Axis and Allies would take longer than this. Hell, a game of Risk would take longer than this. It's like, wait, 10 turns is too long. Woo! Yeah. Why? You know, I don't know. I'm not really big on the quick play, but that's what you got. That was the expansion. But I think you should call it for what it is. I'm gonna knock it, calling it A Dance with Dragons, and there's not even a freaking dragon within the whole thing. It's like, where's the Targaryens, huh? Where? I'll go. Where are the Targaryens? See, they'd be like way over here. It's like, where are the Targaryens? So the Targaryens are nowhere to be found yet, even after their so-called expansion. What they have more or less is quick play. And that's probably some of the bigger cons of the game. Again, I'll kind of just, you know, again, connection issues, expansion, and the randomizer with the AI. Or sure you want to forfeit? Yes. So those are just some of the bigger cons I kind of want to talk about. Overall, like I said, when we looked at the pros of it, it's like, hey, accessibility, I get it. Not everyone it's kind of hard to play a board game distance. It's kind of one of the whole points of having, say, a video game of it. I think a lot as far as, taking the board game. I kind of, and maybe this is another con to add, but I kind of want to stick on a little bit of the pros. And I just I do like the overall, again, taking the board game and putting it into a video game is very neat in that regard. However, those cons, like I said, connection issues, which I don't think is a big issue today, but it's going to give you, if you were playing originally, it's going to give you, you're going to have PTSD about it. I don't like calling something for what it is. Again, if it's an expansion, it's an expansion. That's not an expansion. Let's be honest. It's quick play. That's what they made. And then finally, I don't like the randomization with the AI. It feels like there's times in which it's kind of just slanted a bit much to the AI. There's other glitches that I've noticed that other people have kind of talked about. I'm kind of more of just talking about the things that kind of annoy the hell out of me. Most of the time, if you take a look at this game on Steam, it's mainly positively reviewed. That's going to be one of my other things, and the reason why I covered Lord of the Rings and why I covered Game of Thrones. And this really applies to a lot of whatever you like, whether it's Star Wars, Harry Potter, frickin' Sonic or Zelda, whatever it is, right? Whatever brand that there is, just keep in mind, don't let the brand blind you to what product you've been presented, right? I mean, again, I'll bash on Lord of the Rings. I freaking adore Lord of the Rings, and so that's why I kind of go back to that originally. But I'll be like, no, that Lord of the Rings card game just fell off a cliff. It is horrible. I would not recommend it. And that's kind of one of my points about, on one hand, that I think if you're going to take a card game or if you're going to take a board game and put it in video game format, I actually kind of favor more why don't we kind of change it up a bit, mix things up. I kind of like that more. I like that vibe more. And I kind of wish we would have seen that a little bit more here. And even in the Lord of the Rings card game, I wish we could have, there was more of that going on. But I get it. Again, you don't want to stray too far from the original product. But again, going back to don't let your love of something blind you from the actual value of the product. As far as Game of Thrones and this Kroppi review, because like I said, I hadn't been keeping track of the time, so I don't know how long we've gone. Oh yeah, well, it's ended up becoming like a playthrough. Oops. I'll try and cut it down more. There was just a lot to I kind of more in a mood of like showing the game a little bit, kind of seeing what I'm actually talking about versus just showing the main screen. That's one thing I probably should go back and correct with Lord of the Rings, but it is what it is. As far as actually recommending this game, would I? Again, I think it was kind of like in part with the Lord of the Rings, it seems, is that, it's Game of Thrones. Let's play it. I'll say this much. If this game ended up in your cart and you accidentally bought it, maybe try and get a refund. Just throwing that out. But if you decide to not go that route, then that's your prerogative. Personally, I think if you just want to play the board game, I think there's other options into actually playing the board game. As far as, like I said, I mentioned it before. I don't want to get into a habit of it, but Tabletop Simulator would easily have this game. Tabletop Simulator has stuff that I wouldn't even think is on there. That's more like, well, wait a minute, what do you mean you have miniatures in tabletop? And so in this case, I know this game is most likely someone has actually probably put it onto tabletop, and that's where you could actually play it if you just really, if accessibility is really an issue. And I think that's really what it comes down to, unless you're really going to do what I recommended earlier when it comes to card games and board games, and you rendition them into a video game to maybe change them a bit, right? Change the formula, stray away from the original product. I really can't. I'll be honest, I'm not going to recommend this. Just being honest. And a lot of it goes back to the original cons that I mentioned, connection issues, which, you know, basically gives me PTSD about it. Or when it comes to the, you know, expansions, when they're really quick play, and when it really comes to the when it actually comes to the tides of battle being a little, you know, being a bit slanted. And that one's kind of being probably a little too picky, but I definitely probably would not recommend this game. That's kind of more the stance I take. It's definitely not, like I said, and that's why I mentioned, like, if you accidentally bought it, you know, Lord of the Rings, the card game that we reviewed a couple of weeks back, if you accidentally bought that one, that's one you should definitely go and get your money back. Just being honest. With this one, if you accidentally bought it, you know, maybe it's a glitch in Steam. But anyways, this has been the review of Game of Thrones, the board game. Again, this will be weekly reviews, probably cut down half the time of what I spent today, but sorry. I mean, I kind of wanted to go into the game more and kind of cover a little bit more and like, well, here's some of the pros, here's some of the cons, and this is kind of what I liked about the game, this is what I didn't like, and whether or not you should even waste a dime on the game is kind of the whole point of all of this. And this is another one I'm going to kind of warn about, which is, you know, I just, like I said, if it ends up in your, if you end up buying it by accident, okay, you know, not the end of the world, but I definitely, this is one I would not go out of my way to get. So, with that being, oh, okay, that works. With that being said, we've gone way over what I wanted to, but that's okay. Thanks again for watching the Kroppi review. This is another game that has sadly not fallen, is kind of, you know, definitely not Lord of the Rings level fail of the card game, but as far as this board game goes, I would not recommend it.